Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Inner Work for Greater Good. My name is Emily Eldridge. I'm with Change Light. Please do, I should say this now because I usually wait till the end. Go to, if you want to learn about my work and learn how to do my work, there are a few wonderful resources. One is go to my website, changelight.world, where you can sign up for the free course, which is in our free community, and get all this good training on how to heal your inner struggles so that you can feel more whole, free, and at peace. And also, I have a podcast, Dark Light Truth, where you can listen to episodes on my website or anywhere on any podcast app. So I'm going to tell you that now, because usually I wait till the end, and by then people have probably, right as they see that I'm finishing up, they kind of tune out. So anyway, just want to make sure you get that information. So I'm all about inner work for greater good, to make the most positive difference, but starting within and really healing those wounds, those triggers, those blocks, those blind spots, those issues that we carry inside that cause us to behave in certain ways or react in certain ways. Today I want to talk about motivating versus paralyzing emotions. This came up for me because I realized that I was writing in my journal, and I might have even mentioned something about this struggle in the last episode, but it's basically that, like, I don't always feel hugely, let's put it this way, I might feel motivated to do something, let's say, with regards to my work. However, a part of me is like stopping me. And this happens quite a lot. And over the years, I've healed these different parts, and then I'll feel better for a while. And then sometimes another part will come up and I've got to heal that part. I mean, that's how it goes sometimes. It's like a defragmenting process. And it works. I mean, this is my work, the drawing out process. It's permanently fully healing those parts that get in the way of us fully shining our light and living our truth. And of course, as I developed it, because I've had to do this a lot in my life, and it's made me better at my work, but it also is a struggle and it can be very frustrating. So anyway, I was describing what happens inside me, and I said, it's a fear. Obviously, it's fueled by fear, but the word I used was different, and I never really identified it this way. And it's a common term, but it was just good for me to put words to it and just see if this helps you. But I wrote down paralyzing fear. So it's a paralyzing fear, right? So they always talk about, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. They're all different fear reactions. So it's like this is a freeze response, or even a flight response, but it's like paralyzing. And so then, even though I, in my right mind, and sort of the rest of me really is like, yes, I want to work on this project with my work today, there will be this paralyzing fear. And it's like it stops and it paralyzes me. And it's incredibly frustrating. Well, so I was like looking at this, and it made me really think about how fear can be both paralyzing and motivating. It's not as though the emotion of fear always shows up in the same way, is always felt the same way. And even it can depend on the area of your life, how fear affects you in one area versus another. So for example, when it comes to, let's say, relationships, whether it's friendships or family or my husband, I might feel fear as I'm about to, let's say, have a really intense conversation, or a painful conversation, or a scary conversation, or one that I know might trigger the other person, or, it's bringing up pain for me. So in those situations, like that area of my life, when it comes to that, and see if you can identify this for yourself, like different areas of your life where you feel, let's say, fear in different ways, but that you react differently. In my case, when I think about relationships and stuff like that, or emotional things, I can go at it. I might be scared, but I'm still going to do it. And that's one of those things where people might say, well, you push through the fear, right? They always say, well, feel the fear and do it anyway. And when it comes to, let's say, relationship stuff, I'm like, I can do it. I might be scared, but it's not going to stop me, because I know that this is what I need to do, or because I'm trying to, get a certain result or move something forward, or affect healing between me and that other person, let's say. So fear for me in relationships, generally, I don't get choked up. I don't get paralyzed. I get kind of nervous or anxious, but I still feel motivated to do something about it. But by contrast, like I was describing, when it comes to fear in my work, or certain aspects of my work, maybe not all aspects, and I shouldn't even say my work, when it comes to my business, or like promoting my business, let's say, that I can get that paralyzed fear. And, I work on it, I heal those different parts, but, it tends to be that it's like a paralysis. And so in that case, when people say to me, and people would say, well, you just got to push through the fear. I'm like, have you, like, what? Like, I don't think you understand this kind of fear, not trying to, attack that person or whatever. But it's one of those things. And I know if you felt this too, where it's just this paralyzing, where you're like, or even like, for example, depression. I've been depressed, in the past. And it's like, feels like a million pounds are on top. And I may know that fear is fueling this feeling or this depression. And yet, it's not as though I can push through it. If anything, sometimes what happens when you try to push against or push through that paralysis, it gets heavier and harder, and it can actually have an even worse effect. So I've actually tried to do that. I've tried to push through those kinds of paralyzing fears before. And what ends up happening is it's not as though I go, oh, I'm feeling empowered and actually getting things done. Actually, what ends up happening is I have an even bigger meltdown and it gets worse. And so my point being that those are examples, at least in my life, and think about in your own life, where you can talk about a motivating fear versus a paralyzing fear, or even a fear that, or a motivating fear versus paralyzing fear, even a fear that you can like push through, let's say, versus, or that pushes you. See, that's another one too, that pushes you to make a change or make a difference or have that conversation or achieve that thing, versus one that actually is paralyzing and holding you back. So that's fear. But you can also have that with other emotions or even other inner parts, the inner critic. I've talked about how there are different types of inner critics. It's not as though all inner critics are like attacking and causing you to get smaller. Some do that, right? And then you kind of shrink and you don't want to step out, and because you're afraid of being criticized by other people, let's say, or afraid of getting hurt. But there are inner critics that also push us, that where the criticism actually motivates us to, let's say, work harder or do more to try to avoid being criticized, or to try to, feel better about ourselves or what have you. And so that's where this inner criticism, let's say, can be either motivating or paralyzing, can be either energizing or de-energizing, can be either, pushing or pulling us back. So there are different ways of experiencing emotions in different areas of our lives. And I think it's important to recognize what's the emotion that you're feeling, and just to notice, is this motivating me, or is this paralyzing me? And to honor that. In other words, just kind of go, okay, I'm feeling paralyzed by this. Or, okay, you know what? This is actually motivating me, but ultimately it could end up pushing me too hard, and I could end up, going out of balance. I've worked with so many people who you see them on the outside and you think, wow, they're so successful and amazing, and they're out there achieving all these things. And yet what's motivating them in a not so healthy way is that inner critic, is their inner criticism, or is shame. So shame can be either motivating or paralyzing. And it can be motivating in terms of we're trying to outrun the shame that we're feeling, let's say. And again, that's our reaction too, is like trying to outrun that shame. But then on the other hand, shame can be that kind of feeling that actually makes us feel very dark. And it can also depend on, for example, there's some people who they go through those swings, right? And I've done this too, where I go through those swings where it's like, yeah, there's sometimes when I'm feeling really energized and motivated, and it's being fueled though by that emotion, but then it catches up with me. And then it feels paralyzing and de-energizing. So it's about our relationship with the emotion that can determine whether it's motivating or paralyzing. And mind you, I'm not necessarily trying to put a judgment on whether that's good or bad. Well, I want emotions to be motivating me. I want them to energize me. And it's like, yeah, but the problem is if you are activated based on an emotion like anger or shame or fear, it may not necessarily be healthy. It may not actually have a positive result. I'll give you an example. For example, typically, and this can happen with women too, but typically with men, it's sort of almost stereotypical, where men tend to avoid feeling sadness and they intend to go towards anger rather than sadness, because anger feels energizing and anger feels empowering. But that's often because of conditioning that basically tells men or boys, that it's not okay to cry, that it's not okay to feel sad, or that you have to be tough, you have to be strong. And so what ends up happening is that to avoid that sadness, there's the anger, and the anger is trying to motivate. So on the one hand, yeah, that could be great, because anger can be used to get out of scary situations. It can be used to really charge forth and make a difference. It can be used for a number of things. But then there's the sadness that's underneath it. And also that anger can end up hurting people. You can end up becoming too aggressive in that unconscious avoidance of what's actually feeling it, which is the sadness, because of the fear of the paralysis. So you see how it's not necessarily entirely like, oh, if it's motivating, then great, because it could be motivating you in not so healthy a direction, and you end up hurting people, or hurting yourself as a result. So I pretty much have covered some of the points, but I guess as always, I just want to bring up this in this point, it's more about kind of like not a how-to, but just an awareness thing. Just be aware of how you react to that emotion, how that emotion causes you to behave, how it's fueling you or holding you back or thwarting you, and just noticing how emotions can be motivating or paralyzing, how they can be energizing or de-energizing. And I will tell you this, something that I actually ended up discovering with this one part of me that just came up recently, and I still need to work on him, feels like a him, is that I noticed that the effect he was having on me was criticizing me. And it's so interesting because it's like so subtle. And normally when it comes to inner critics, or that kind of energy that's trying to shame me or criticize me, is that I will sit and listen to it and honor it and, find out where it came from. But instead, something prompted me this time to realize that, no, I needed to set my boundaries with it. It had been paralyzing me. So that feeling that was coming up, that paralyzing fear, what he was doing to me was paralyzing me. But once I started to honor, okay, this is paralyzing me, but it doesn't feel good for me, then I actually started to feel motivated to basically set my boundaries with this part of me and say, no, not okay to treat me this way. And so it's kind of interesting how even just in that dynamic, there's the both and of it. And that actually we can have parts of us and emotions inside of us that we can actually shift our relationship with that part. Like I said, normally I tend to be more, caring and kind, and that's my general approach. But sometimes it reaches a point where I realize that no, actually, I think this part of me it's a call for me to set my boundaries with those kinds of behaviors, the way it was shaming me or making me feel small or less than or worthless. And so it was kind of a good thing for me to have that shift. And I realized, wait a minute, I'm not going to negotiate with this guy. This guy's a bully, and it's not okay. And this is not the kind of situation where it's about, oh, I'm sorry you're feeling that way. It may turn into that again. I haven't fully processed him. I've been kind of working on a lot of other things, but just kind of interesting way to look at it, that sometimes, we do need to have a different relationship with how we feel. And that can determine, that could be a motivating one or a paralyzing one, but that can also determine, how we move through and out of it. So anyway, I realized this was maybe felt sort of like random, but I just think it's an interesting topic to think about that and to notice the dynamics. Maybe that's really what it is. It's about the dynamics that we have with those feelings and that they have with us. And that being aware of those dynamics can help shift the dynamics, the relationships that we have with them, and also, how we move through and out of those emotions that are causing us pain and stress and suffering. All right. Hope this is helpful for you. As always, I'm Emily. I already told you about my website, changelight.world. Free course, drawing out process. You can learn my technique, which is so incredibly powerful and amazing. And also listen to people actually go through the drawing out process and permanently fully heal inner critics, wounded inner children, all kinds of things that get in the way of us feeling truly whole and at peace. All right. I hope you're well, and I will see you next week.